Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, the show that goes behind the trillion-dollar business of sports, marketing, deal-making, law, culture, business, anthropology. You can call it anything you want to, but the bottom line is it gets bigger every single week. And boy, we're up against it now. The NHL All-Star Game, NBA All-Star Game, close to it. We're at the halfway point. Daytona 500, a few days away. Australian Open happening, golf in Hawaii, college football crowns Alabama, and obviously the tremendous playoffs. Baltimore, Washington not in, but that doesn't affect the ability to have a amazing 3 out of 4 playoff games this past weekend, and more on the way as the Vikings may head to the first hosting of the Super Bowl in history. If you want to learn more, go to NBCWashington.com. We have our 15 topics of the week, plus 5 tech topics, plus 5 philanthropic power topics. We get CSN-NE and all the other regionals, but NBC Washington, the home for all of this. And you ought to take a look at our join us on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Audio Boom, Stitcher. Look for us all over the place. And this week, very interesting guests. We celebrate hockey, basketball, football, soccer, it all combined. So we also celebrate sports people in the mold of Abe Pollin, a tremendous sportsman in the Washington, Baltimore area, but viewed as kind of the father of sports in North America. Someone who came up at about the same time, Richard Petty. He began his career in marketing after graduating University of Windsor in Canada, 96, but he's been involved in many ways. The president, CEO of the Raptors. He was also president and CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. The Maple Leafs and the Raptors merged at that point. He ran the company for 14 years and oversaw the building of Air Canada Centre, the launch of the Leafs and Raptors TV, the expansion of Major League Soccer to Canada, the creation of TFC.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
The expansion of Major League Soccer to Canada, the creation of TFC, and during this time, the building of Maple Leaf Square occurred. Under Richard Petty, the MLSE grew from a $3 million enterprise value to $2 billion property. And he believed 4 core values: excite every fan, inspire our people, be dedicated to our teams, and be leaders in the community. As we're coming up on NFL Championship Weekend and Super Bowl and the intersection of all of those sports, let's hear what Richard Petty has to say. Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, keeping score in the boardroom. Diversity is the name of the game, and we're here at this primetime conference, the 10th annual, as we do every year. This is different. We have somebody whose head probably gets a little tired because he has 14 million hats that the guy wears. He's Pagula Sports Entertainment. He worked with the Jets, the Browns, a whole bunch of other teams, IMG, Diverse Experience, and now Diverse and Diverse. Bruce Popko, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
So we don't have enough time, but kind of go through your career from teams to IMG and then Pagula Sports.
Sure. It's really been almost primarily in football. Yeah. Grew up working for the New York Jets, went to the league office, which is in Manhattan, got recruited out of there to go to San Francisco, spent a few years there, then ended up migrating back to head east towards Cleveland. 12 years in Cleveland, split between the Cleveland Browns and then IMG, to your point, working on the golf side of the business for 5 years, and then got the itch to try to get back into football, and went to the Bills and have been there for starting my 10th season.
So before we talk about Pagula Sports a bit, because it's not just football,
sure.
It's lacrosse, it's minor league, it's everything. The IMG piece was primarily golf, and you're primarily a football guy. The skills that you need to master all of those jobs, are they more similar, or are they more different?
Very similar. I think ultimately you're still relating to the people, whether it's a sponsor that you're looking to, get on board, whether it's managing an athlete and something that they're doing. I actually managed 2 players, during my golf days there. Patrick Harrington, I did domestically.
Yeah.
And then Natalie Gulbis on the LPGA side. So, 2 very different personalities.
And he was winning when you managed him.
Yeah, Patrick had won the British Open at that point.
Did you have any input in
No, I was really his domestic stuff, so kind of helping out here and there and with some deals and things like that. Natalie was much more kind of really direct input, helping her out. She was at a point in career where she had been injured a little bit, so she was trying to get back to kind of the stability of being on tour and playing a normal tour schedule. She was and still is one of the most personable. Yeah. I mean, someone that really you could send out into any situation and he knew it would be, just fireworks and everybody would be excited about her presence. Still stay in touch with her today, so I mean, she's a great person. So.
But golf, women's, men's, lacrosse now, minor leagues in all contexts. But then Pegula Sports was really giving you an opportunity to cover the waterfront.
Yeah, for sure. It's, as I always say, sort of deal making is deal making.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you're doing it in either a sponsorship and advertising realm, we're doing commercial real estate development now in kind of the near proximity to the arena. We're doing, lease fronting kind of the conversation even in Rochester with our minor league hockey affiliate, the Rochester Americans. So, yeah, sort of doing deals is sort of doing deals. You begin to draw in expertise for things that you don't have sort of maybe core competency against. But ultimately, like, being able to strike the deals is the most, inspiring part of what we do every day.
Let's talk about the Bills in the NFL first. New stadium, process, what's going on?
We're at this sort of inflection point where we've got, after the season, we'll have 5 years left on the current lease, for now what is a 43-year-old building. Yeah. Bones are still good. We put, a bunch of money into it 3 years ago now. So it's doing well. What the long-term viability just physically of the building is the next thing that we have to study. I think there's a lot of talk about, building a new building would be great, developing kind of this enormous downtown entertainment district maybe around the arena where the Sabres play would be wonderful. It's a long process. I mean, if we sort of reflect on Atlanta, and Atlanta had their land already basically right next to the Georgia Dome, and that was still 10 years. Yeah. So even if we kind of tell Terry and Kim Pegula, our owners, even if we start today, we're probably 8 years in a minimum because we probably wouldn't go as grand as Mercedes-Benz, and what they did in Atlanta. But I will tell you, it's a very long journey. We don't have those answers yet. There's so many twists and turns and really, the economic equation to take on that much debt in a market of our size is difficult than doing it in a top 20 market in the United States.
But Western New York loves the Bills, and the public-private partnership opportunities are still there.
For sure. And, I will tell you, it's been a really strong partnership that we've had with both the county and the state of New York, Erie County and the state of New York. That will continue. The leadership there has been great. This will now become really kind of big stakes poker, though. I mean, this is really now you're talking about, what will probably end up being hundreds of millions of dollars deployed somewhere, either in the existing stadium for the next round of kind of super renovation or trying to figure out if a new building makes more sense for us.
You realize some of the deals that have been done, and are all over the map, but Steve Ross went into the super renovation, and now he looks back after $500 million, and his bones are fine, but it's an entirely new facility.
It is. It's an entirely new facility, and I think that much like his orientation, really supplementing and creating the best fan experience that he could possibly do is at the forefront, I know, of a lot of their thinking, because it was, to your point, it was good bones, but the fan experience elements of it were probably substandard, and I think he's changed that very dramatically. And, to your point, you said you'd gone to a bunch of games. Just the vibe there is different than it was 5 years ago.
It's no longer just an open-air stadium.
Right.
It is not an open-air stadium.
Right. Yeah.
Retractable? opportunity there?
I think that at least what Terry Pagula, our owner, has said is he likes open air. He likes, the inherent advantage that we have of being open air. If I was to speculate, and it's really kind of more a little bit of my own speculation and just listening closely enough to him, I would think we'd probably do something more like Seattle, where you'd have a roof that would cover a good portion of the stands, but still be open air, and kind of go with that sort of model.
Where's Toronto fit in the regional equation of all this?
Hugely important. You can't ignore 6-7 million people that are up here. Really that Southern Ontario side of us and that draw that we get from kind of Hamilton on down becomes a vital part of. They're a little bit less relevant in terms of season tickets, but they're very relevant in terms of individual games. Like they really participate in game by game, kind of decide how they're going to interact, but it's a pretty big portion of our fan base.
Why are the cynics being listened to so much for the NFL now, business-wise? The ratings, the injuries on Thursday night. There's the same arguments, but people seem to be listening.
I think that when you're on top, the arrows kind of come with a little bit more frequency ultimately. The funny part is you never hear the ratings decline conversation ever done in a comparative sense. It's always done in absolute terms of just us, but you never put it against where is primetime falling? Where are other sports falling? And you sort of say it's also off of a much bigger base. So ultimately, to have that kind of drop off of that big a base, you sit and I'm always most concerned with what are the TV executives themselves saying.
Yeah.
And when they tell you that live sports entertainment programming is still kind of the panacea that fixes all, or at least kind of the North Star that they can rely on, you're in good shape.
How much do you care about what advertisers are telling you? So some of the media will take the outlying advertiser and point to some returns like Papa John's and say, hey, the NFL is not performing for me.
Yeah, and I think for them, they had a very specific orientation to the underperformance or lack of performance, which was around some player behavior, some player activity stuff.
Right.
I think candidly
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
You care about what advertisers are telling you. So some of the media will take the outlying advertiser and point to some returns like Papa John's and say, hey, the NFL is not performing for me.
Yeah, and I think for them, they had a very specific orientation to the underperformance or lack of performance, which was around some player behavior, some player activity stuff.
Right.
I think candidly they're probably an outlier. We deal in the television advertising arena every day for both the big teams, because for the hockey team as well, we produce all our games. We sell all the advertising against that on MSG, and I will tell you, we don't really get complaints like that. Now, we also are in a region where our ratings really hold very well, regardless of we haven't really performed on the field to the degree we would like to. Yeah. But I think it's a lot of chatter when it really comes down.
And fan avidity, obviously, very important. And by the way, to the ones that are listening, the pepperoni pizza killed that a little bit. The ones with there's a lot of grapefruit, there's a lot of pineapple. That stuff's really good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So
even the little chicken wing pizzas.
The chicken wing pizzas are,
can't go wrong with that.
And it's supposed to be healthy.
Partial to buffalo.
Right, exactly. But it's hard to eat the pizza without the bread. But that's another entirely different story. Right. So, all right. So on-field, on-ice performance. Let's shift to the Sabres for a second. You have a magnificent development plan for downtown Buffalo. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So we are in a 21-year-old building in Key Bank Center. So we are sort of ripe for that next level of renovation. Same idea. Really enhancing fan experience. Really taking advantage of some of the parts of the real estate itself and the footprint to make sure we put enough programming in there that the fans want to be there early and stay late. I mean, it's as simple as that. We've built Harbor Center right next to it, which is 2 sheets of ice, largely oriented towards the amateur side of the game.
Yeah.
We've got the World Juniors coming in the end of the year now, and now all of a sudden we're beginning to sort of shift our focus or add to our focus some other commercial development. So really kind of beginning to extend the perimeter, create more of an entertainment district. We just bought an 80,000 square foot facility literally directly across the street from the arena, redeveloping that into a restaurant, a brewery. Labatt is relocating their headquarters there, their corporate headquarters there. So exciting times as we kind of are sort of right in the middle of a lot of developments going on in the city of Buffalo.
And my buddy Nick Shakevich would kill me if I didn't ask about lacrosse.
Yeah,
so
sure.
what's your thought about that?
Love it. I actually played field lacrosse in college, so I was a bad player on a really good team, as I tell everybody. So I have a huge affinity for the sport. My boys play it. My daughter played it as well when she was in high school. So Nick and I had lunch yesterday talking about kind of the future of the league. We're very, very bullish on it. Love where the Bandits sit in relation to the teams that are in the league. We look at ourselves as, we're kind of the old guard to some degree, 26 years in existence now. We lead the league in attendance, or we fight it out with Saskatchewan kind of now year in and year out with all the success that they've had. So I think the future is incredibly bright for that league, and I think Nick and kind of the captain's chair is going to be really great for us.
Pagula Sports, give me a sense of how the Pagulas feel about their investments, probably more so in Western New York. They're custodians of a very significant economic development engine.
Yeah, no, and I will tell you, they take that custodial responsibility incredibly seriously. And the great part about what they are trying to do, every project and every piece of sort of growth that we look at is really about creating jobs. And I think it's sort of not to be understated in this day and age is, Terry and Kim don't do it for vanity. They don't do it for accolade. They hate getting awards. They do it because they know that they can be a growth engine in our community. And they take that job very seriously.
And they've come to be recognized in the pantheon of fantastic community owners like the Crafts in New England and otherwise.
Sure, exactly. I mean, you look at Patriot Place, and while that was, certainly pioneering when it came on, took them a little while to kind of get the momentum, but you look at just what it is right now, what it represents. We're in a little different situation in terms of where we are geographically, but then you look at, we have the same kind of footprint surrounding New Era Field right now. It's not out of the realm of possibility that if we decide to stay in that stadium, that's the next wave of development that might accompany it.
And they put together great full service. They have an analytics component and otherwise that are first rate.
They do. I mean, you look at kind of across the board, and as much as we compete with them on the field, we can't stand the run of success that they've had. You have to admire everything that they've done and the diversity of their portfolio.
Yeah.
They're just like us. They've got, teams in multiple leagues that they manage and a lot of other business units, and it's become kind of what you have to do to gain, I think, the utmost relevance and really take advantage of the economies that you afford yourself. We have centralized a lot of our marketing, business development, finance across all these teams and all these entities, and there's great economies that afforded us.
Speaking of economies and diversity, so do you wake up someday and say, which sport am I going to deal with today? How do you allocate your time?
You do a little bit, and you have to really make a conscious effort to be relevant sort of wherever you're going.
Yeah.
So you have to make a point of, I'm driving down in the stadium today. I'm going to go kind of walk the halls a little bit. I'm going to go to the arena today, be around the Sabres and the Bandits. I'm going to go to Rochester today. That's probably the biggest thing, is just learning now in this sort of newer position for me, that discipline of don't forget about anybody.
Do you have a routine, so it's Monday, Wednesday?
I don't. I will tell you, it really is a little bit more as kind of catch as catch can.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, you put the fireman hat on and you might be putting out fires a little bit. And then in the midst of it, you sort of fill out and say, kind of, what haven't I done this week, or what haven't I paid attention to this week?
What have you given up because you're running 48 franchises now? You look like a golfer because you're pretty low to the ground. So what are you doing? You can't play golf in Buffalo anyway for 9 months out of the year.
Like everything, life's about balance. I think that, unfortunately, we're sort of attached to our phones and that sort of thing. But I really haven't given up much. It's really just a matter of orientation, and a huge part of it has been delegation. A lot of the things that I used used to feel like I had to be strictly involved in or see on the way out or whatever it was. You have to, we've trusted the management team we've put together. They're a very talented group of individuals. You got to go let them do their jobs.
So finally, where is Bruce Popko and where is Pagula Sports 5 years from now?
5 years from now, Tom is retired, hopefully, and not playing for the Patriots anymore.
There's a direct message.
Yeah, Jack has maybe Eichel's got it. Maybe his second ring on at that point. It's all trending in the right direction. I think that you sort of see where these franchises are going. You see where Buffalo is going as a city. When I got there, there were never cranes in the air. There were a lot of, closed up buildings, and it just, the orientation of the city and the city getting beyond kind of feeling sorry for itself or having to make excuses for itself has really changed. And I just see that it's going to sort of catapult that thing from here.
Testimonial about sports and economic development.
Without a doubt. I mean, we're part of it. There's a huge medical community there. There's a lot of other things that are driving it. And we're really happy to be hitting it at kind of just a true renaissance moment.
So as work-life balance continues, next time the Bills are down south, we need to tee it up.
Yeah, for sure. Love to.
Deal, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Richard Petty clearly has a different and amazing perspective as we take a look at all of the sports. And obviously, the key ones now are focused on the pigskin variety. The NFL playoffs draw to their thrilling conclusion this coming weekend. The trend in the NFL appears to be throwing money at free agents, big money. The cap explodes from $120 million to $167 million over the past 6 years, rising at least $10 million per year in the past 4 seasons. And the team building strategies completely different over the last few years. Titans, Vikings, Jaguars, Patriots, Rams, Panthers, they all went to the playoffs, and those are 6 of the top 10 spenders. The Jaguars, as we know, went from 3-13 to 10-6. The formula is still working as they play the Patriots during the weekend. Likewise, the free agent happy Vikings, after their amazing finish, take on the Eagles at home and look to be the first team in NFL history to play a home Super Bowl championship game. Obviously, stay tuned. And the NFL continues to drive and thrive and dominate the market. Just a few weeks from now, Super Bowl 52, and NBC expected to rake in $500 million in revenue on Super Bowl Sunday from longtime advertisers Pepsi, Hyundai, Budweiser. Ads $5 million plus 30-second spot. Numbers are similar to last year, and Executive VP in Sales and Marketing Don Lovinger from NBCU confirmed the numbers, also added that advertising demand for next month's Olympics in Korea has been similarly strong. For the Olympics, the net's projecting an audience close to 21.4 million viewers tuned in each night to the 2014 Sochi Games, a projected $900 million in advertising revenue from the Olympics alone. And the events, by the way, only 5 days apart, should bring a major windfall of cash to NBC. And obviously, that's what they planned all along. NFL other media news, Amazon said its Thursday night NFL audience outpaced Twitter. 11-game Thursday night football NFL package. It said their viewership numbers are pretty high. And they claim victory over Twitter by an average minute audience. The numbers that Amazon provided to Sports Techie indicated that AMA tuning into NFL action on Prime Video for at least 30.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Super Bowl 52. And NBC expected to rake in $500 million in revenue on Super Bowl Sunday from longtime advertisers Pepsi, Hyundai, Budweiser. Ads $5 million plus 30-second spot. Numbers are similar to last year, and Executive VP in Sales and Marketing Don Lovinger from NBCU confirmed the numbers. Also added that advertising demand for next month's Olympics in Korea has been similarly strong. For the Olympics, the net's projecting an audience close to 21.4 million viewers tuned in each night to the 2014 Sochi Games, a projected $900 million in advertising revenue from the Olympics alone. And the events, by the way, only 5 days apart, should bring a major windfall of cash to NBC. And obviously, that's what they planned all along. NFL other media news, Amazon said its Thursday night NFL audience outpaced Twitter. 11-game Thursday night football NFL package. It said their viewership numbers are pretty high. And they claimed victory over Twitter by an average minute audience. The numbers that Amazon provided to Sports Techie indicated that AMA tuning into NFL action on Prime Video for at least 30 seconds more than 310,000, a number said to be about 17% higher than Twitter during the 2016 season. Amazon used a 30-second AMA increment because they said the data point was most compatible to average TV ratings and thus more similar to the traditional Nielsen numbers. Bottom line is, whoever is leading or not, we've been an advocate for compatible measurement all along. Eyeballs on TV, eyeballs on Twitter, eyeballs on Amazon, Facebook, Snapchat, iPhones, iPads. They're all important eyeballs. And eyeballs on devices are young eyeballs. Young eyeballs have their parents buy old goods. Really important. Other TV stuff on the NFL? Tom Brady, a documentary granting filmmaker Gotham Chopra sweeping access to an array of intimate settings, including footage of Brady at his Brookline, Mass. Home with his family. The 6-episode series, titled Tom vs. Time, meant to give fans an inside view of his life off the field and how the quarterback's been able to remain so effective this late in his career on it. He doesn't discuss anything related to prayer protests, trading Jimmy Garoppolo, or his polarizing body coach, Alex Guerrero. Yet, this looks to be a well-timed extension of the Brady brand, especially when he's barreling toward another Super Bowl appearance. Saturday's thumping of the Titans, any gauge? You bet. How about another celebrity in the NFL pantheon? John Gruden, 10-year, $100 million deal. The San Francisco Chronicle said his introductory press conference was held at the team's Alameda Coliseum in their recently built weight room as being the biggest day of my life right now to have him here. He said Mark Davis says. 110 media members, 50 former Raider players. Gruden hung up the microphone when he left his position at ESPN, highest paid on-camera employee, to step back onto the sideline. And for $10 million a year, Gruden will indeed be expected to add some sizzle to the Raiders brand in Oakland and in Vegas before, during, and after 2020. And by the way, NFL owners may be seething because that increases the market rate for coaches. It certainly didn't require equity to be given to him, which would have been another entirely different kettle of fish for the NFL, giving equity to a coach that's supposed to be reserved for ownership. We'll see. And obviously, a lot more to go with the NFL as we get closer to Super Bowl 52. Hard to believe it. We'll look at the NBA. Their most recent international game, a matchup between the Celtics and the Sixers, a success by the league after a sellout crowd packed O2 Arena in London. 36 European broadcast partners, Europe, Middle East, and the like, NBA coverage being created all over the place, and it's such a European all-star game for us and European contacts and fans. All of these folks will come to LA for the trade show that is the NBA All-Star Game, third week in February, and obviously the NBA International beating everybody to the punch as far as basketball is concerned. How about a tale of two cities? Well, first of all, the Timberwolves. They acquired Jimmy Butler in the offseason. 2,000 more fans attend the games this last season. They average about 16,000 fans, make it up to 17,000, and a 20% increase in season ticket sales following the offseason trade for Jimmy Butler. And a single ticket gain throughout the first half of the season leads to more and more and more. The next few weeks telling for the T-Wolves. The franchise dealing with fans distracted by local Super Bowl activities in Minnesota, especially if the Vikings get there. Well, we'll have to check that out and see what happens. How about Dallas? Well, that's the other end of the spectrum. They've done nothing to stop the team's unbeatable attendance record, even though they've been less than stellar on the court this year. Their sellout streak began in 2001, and by the way, continued through this season, even though they're 15-28, a mere half game in front of the Kings and the Grizzlies and God forbid, the Lakers. The team, 727th consecutive home sellout and the second longest streak in NBA history, behind the Trailblazers, 814. Yeah, it's hard to put a price on fan loyalty, but the Mavericks front office staff would likely say their fans are worth their weight in gold. Kudos to their fans. Obviously, a lot of issues here, not necessarily related to quality. How about other NBA issues? Well, Chinese basketball partners with Brightal Digital. Chinese Basketball Association will soon be receiving robust data solutions, partnership between Beitai Digital and the league's official exclusive data service provider. Beitai will be directly involved in a number of these activities. They'll develop data products and services for the league and its fans. Collecting stable and accurate data statistics is the first phase of the partnership. The developments include 40% more data points per game and more analytical stats. Data will be made available to broadcasters, CBA teams, and preferred digital media outlets for their pre- and post-game analysis. Good for them. So obviously the NBA going international. It's going to a variety of cities. How about this? You can be a pioneer, including Orlando Magic's Becky Bonner. Over the last few years, women have slowly moved into positions of power within the NBA front offices. And there's still a ways to go, but for female decision makers already in place, the possibility they could run a franchise themselves isn't just theory anymore. Officially, Becky Bonner, the Magic Director of Player Development and Quality Control, tasked with everything from player appearances and facility upgrades to scouting and player evaluation. Unofficially, she's training to become a GM, perhaps the first female GM in the league history. One night, she's shepherding Magic players through Walmart. The next day, she's filing reports on a batch of draft prospects, then watching the Magic Clippers game from the executive suite, alongside Magic President Jeff Weltman and GM John Hammond. In the weeks and months ahead, she'll be in the Magic's war room, offering input on free agent targets or potential deals in advance of the February 8th trade deadline. She is clearly one of the lone female voices in the industry, certainly the lone female voice in that room, and one of the few in the NBA, period. Kudos to her. Watch her long term, clearly, in the boardrooms around the NBA. Let's shift to hockey. Everybody focused on the NHL All-Star Game after the NFL championships this week and NBA All-Star Game taking place in Tampa. 3-on-3 tournament just like last year. Lightning lead the league with 4 selections: Kucherov, Stamkos, Hedman, and Vasilevsky. Lightning head coach John Cooper will head the Atlantic Division. And despite playing in South Florida, the Lightning currently rank 6th in the NHL in attendance, averaging 19,000 fans through 22 home games this season. Another sign the NHL Southern expansion continues to pay off over time. Bottom line, by the way, is NHL is great for what they're doing, but they're not going to the Olympics. And frankly, that's overshadowed by who is going. Now that South and North have agreed that they'll send a contingent to the Winter Olympics, the IOC has to work out the details and specifics. First time the bordering nations have talked about this stuff. One of the primary Olympic ideals since the Games beginning is to remain apolitical and expect Olympic committees and broadcasters to strive to maintain that ideal. Athletes and politicians, especially those with big social media followings, are the wild cards. How about a South Korean and North Korean hockey team? It doesn't really matter how they play or whether they play well or not. It's like ping pong diplomacy 50 years later. And by the way, as long as the Olympics have a significant social good and they continue to do it, how about Afghanistan? Afghanistan is the first time that country has become a participant in the Winter Olympics, or any of the Olympics for that matter. The story of 2 Afghan skiers is a story that defies norms. They're going to make Olympic history at the Games in South Korea. Afghan Olympic Committee president registered the 2 in November 17, and news of their acceptance broke shortly afterwards. Their stories stand out, not only because of the first athletes to represent this long war-torn country, but because of their modest beginnings. Their journey to Olympic enrollment does not parallel a typical athlete's journey, but it reflects how true passion and love of the sport has been a driving factor for the 2 skiers. After living as a refugee in Iran for 13 years, the 26-year-old Husseini returned to Afghanistan and started skiing at 21. Farhang, who's 27, started skiing 7 years ago at the age of 19. Both skiers much older than most professional athletes when they're introduced to the sport. But we wanted to represent Afghanistan in a different way, to show the other countries that Afghanistan is not only war and destruction, said Husseini, one of the skiers. Exactly what the Olympic ideals are all about. Look for them and other superstars to cash in.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Play or whether they play well or not. It's like ping pong diplomacy 50 years later. And by the way, as long as the Olympics have a significant social good and they continue to do it, how about Afghanistan? Afghanistan is the first time that country has become a participant in the Winter Olympics, or any of the Olympics for that matter. The story of 2 Afghan skiers is a story that defies norms. They're going to make Olympic history at the Games in South Korea. Afghan Olympic Committee president registered the 2 in November 17, and news of their acceptance broke shortly afterwards. Their stories stand out, not only because of the first athletes to represent this long war-torn country, but because of their modest beginnings. Their journey to Olympic enrollment does not parallel a typical athlete's journey, but it reflects how true passion and love of the sport has been a driving factor for the 2 skiers. After living living as a refugee in Iran for 13 years, the 26-year-old Husseini returned to Afghanistan and started skiing at 21. Farhang, who's 27, started skiing 7 years ago at the age of 19. Both skiers much older than most professional athletes when they're introduced to the sport, but we wanted to represent Afghanistan in a different way, to show the other countries that Afghanistan is not only war and destruction, said Husseini, one of the skiers. Exactly what the Olympic ideals are all about. Look for them and other superstars to cash in after the Olympics are over, regardless of the performance. Well, that's our performance for the day. We'd like to thank Richard Petty for giving us perspective about all sports. We'd also like to thank Dan Martin for putting this together with Tanner Simpkins. Next week, we have the anniversary of the Miami Dolphins' undefeated Super Bowl. Bob Greasy will be with us. We'll focus on the NHL All-Star Game, and we'll get ready for the Super Bowl. Thank you all for listening and watching, and join us once again when we go Beyond the Score.